The presidential election last year wasn't the only election Biden lost. He's also lost the election that hasn't yet happened in Israel, the one that he tried very much to influence. And yeah, I do count it as Biden losing the election, even though he didn't run eventually. We can get into that. We'll get into a lot more on today's episode of the reality show. But yeah, we knew some of this, but more of it is coming out. How the U.S. How the Biden administration used taxpayer funds in the U.S. to try to influence Israeli politics. The one country in the Middle East that actually gets to elect its leaders. Biden wasn't happy with their choice, so he did something about it, and it didn't really work out for him. But um, it's the thought that counts. Welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by yeah, Daniel and Michael. Michael, you are, I think, the only U.S. citizen here. So I will go to you. Is this what you're happy to pay taxes for?
Well, I always like to remind people that the largest pro-Hamas, pro-quote Palestinian demonstration in October of last year or all of last year, was at the Democratic National Convention. And instead of condemning it, really, most of the Democrats either supported it or were quiet about it. And that's a pro-terrorist entity that is listed as a terrorist organization by the United States. Is it any surprise that the Biden State Department was giving money duplicitously, quietly, and under the radar to this groups that would undermine Israel? I don't understand why anybody's surprised. The um, the brokenness of the State Department under Biden and under Obama is really unprecedented in American history, I think. Maybe under Carter. It is a terrible organization. It was a weak country. Obama coined the absurd term leading from behind, which is exactly doublespeak. George Orwell would have applauded that. He would have been thrilled. For those of you who don't know, George Orwell was the author of the word doublespeak, when you can say two things at the same time that are contradictory and people think you're brilliant. And that's what happened with Obama. And what happened under the State Department is that essentially a lot of anti-Israel, frankly, anti-Western stuff was funded. And I wasn't the least bit surprised. I think this is the beginning of uncovering it. I don't frankly think Joe Biden knew about most of it. I think Joe Biden was pretty much demented most of his presidency. And I'm saying that both as a physician and also as a citizen of the US. There were many times when he was on TV when I said to my wife, this is not right. That man is not all there. And it is remarkable that he has his fingers on the nuclear codes in our country. And it is despicable what has gone on. The fact that this hasn't really been uncovered yet overall, but especially with the going against our best ally in the Middle East is just part of the corruption of the Biden administration.
So yeah, that moment in the debate. I mean, we kind of knew Biden wasn't all there, but that moment in the debate that is going to be studied in political history in the U.S., where
Yeah.
we saw the extent to which he really was not there. I mean, that's clear. On the other hand, he was there for the vast majority of his political career, and this is in line with who he was. So whoever was running things, if it wasn't Biden, were people he chose, were people it's fair to say if he was fully there, he would likely be doing what was being done in his name. Yeah, your thoughts on it? Yeah.
Yeah, if things are done on your behalf and they are bad, you either responsible for that and agreeing to that, or completely incompetent. Both are bad for you. And I just want to say, like an anecdote. When the debate was happening, I was in the States and I was watching it in a Republican event. So there was a bunch of Republicans watching the debate, and we were seeing live. Like I was seeing live two things. I was seeing live, Biden completely falling apart, and reaction of some Republicans. Now there were some who were more intelligent and some who were less intelligent. And the most people were like cheering, happy, we're gonna win this. And I could see some more characters I appreciate better scratching their head and like thinking, okay, what's gonna happen now? Okay, so Biden is down, and who's going to replace him, and what does it mean for the race? And I think that was a very interesting side to see, because it has a point. Like we got Kamala, and I'm very glad that she wasn't elected, but it was closer than.
We lost you.
Well, you
I'm
speak
sorry, I have some.
Kamala, and that's what happens. Yeah, I think we have you back.
Well, that's what happens with Kamala. You lose everything. No, I'm just kidding. What I was saying that it was closer than it seems with Kamala.
Yeah, Daniel, it's pretty surprising considering, I mean, I'm not at all sure Trump would have won this election had the Democrats said, in early 2024 or in 2023, look, Biden um, is is out of commission. Even I don't know what exactly they would have done, because the thing is, it's not just that he shouldn't have been running in the 2024 election. He should have left office, and Harris should have, as the vice president, should have taken office, and then really what she would have done as president for that year or so would have been what she had been judged on. But there's no doubt that Americans, when they saw Biden, they didn't just see a person who can't, think straight and run the country, but also a whole organization behind him that was intentionally lying to the people they're asking for their votes from. So I think that very much had an effect, and yeah, contributed to costing them the election.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I think somebody within sort of like close to his administration, somebody said, like, Biden, some days he has better days and some days he has worse days. And, I remember a clip, I think it was from like late 2024, where he's like on the White House, in the White House like lawn, and he's like running across. There is like journalists like camera and have camera on them. Then he runs to them, makes a few coherent sentences, and then like runs away again. And that is the closest I've ever been to like a conspiracy theorist, believing in the body double. That there's two different Bidens. But yeah, I mean, on that, when you get old, yeah, maybe because even when you have to think, like, I cannot imagine why they would ever even do the debate. I think they were literally just betting on maybe he'll come away across. But also, I don't think there was anybody else they could have put on the Democratic side to really win. So I think they were like sort of screwed either way. But talking about again this specific sort of instance, so I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but this started in I think back in March, when a Republican House committee has basically tried to look into how some of the U.S. aid has been spent. Now, I think Michael earlier mentioned that this went under the radar, and in some ways it's even worse because this is not under the radar. This is an official business of the or sort of official government business. It's US aid is sending money to certain organizations. They send it to many of them. So unless you look into it, you don't know where exactly it's going. So like even if I read you from the list, right? USAID is sending sort of money to through different organizations. It's going to Kana Alliance for Israel's Democracy, Darkenu, Physicians for Human Rights Israel, Blue White Future, it sounds like organizations. You don't know what they're about. It's only after you look into them, and after this committee has looked into it, where we know what it's actually going in, where we know that some of these organizations have been organizing anti-Netanyahu protests, have been involved in anti-Netanyahu sort of politics, right? And there's like two different ways you can take this. First of all, USA shouldn't exist. The role of government is not to spend taxpayers' money to uh, is not even to sort of like provide food or provide research in its own country, let alone do it in other countries. And but at the very least, what it shouldn't do is sort of support uh, organizations that are actively sort of going against the government, especially if it's our ally. So I have a few more things to say on sort of both the US aid and the way this has worked, but if you want to take it again, Razi.
Yeah, just on your question, why would they do the debate? I mean, to the credit of U.S. politics, as opposed to like Britain or Israel, you can't run for president and not do a debate, and and still be taken as a serious candidate. And in part because the people have to see if you're actually, mentally capable, which in Biden's case, they saw that he wasn't. So yeah, I can't imagine somebody being the nominee of a major party and saying, "I'm not going to do a televised debate." I don't know. I think that has never happened since the first debate in 1960. As far as I know, there have always been has always been at least one debate. Um, Thank you, Bullmoose, for the super chat. Bullmoose says, "I want to know who was the main puppet master architect once he became non-functional. Unfortunately, I don't know what sort of crime that would entail." Yeah, me neither. I don't know if there is a crime. Look, any leader surrounds himself with people who, to some extent or another, have influence on what he does. That's part of the job. In Biden's case, it was clearly beyond that, and I think the it may not be an actual crime, but the punishment was given by the American people on election day. Um,
Maybe just
Michael.
to add to that, Razi, but so I mean, I believe that this is a much bigger cover up than Watergate. I mean, you think about what happened in Watergate, the Republicans basically funded a bunch of guys to break into the Democratic headquarters and figure out their strategy. This was a group of people that surrounded the president of the United States, the man who has been elected to run the country and also to defend the country, including nuclear codes. And they basically pretended he was fine. That Congress is looking into this. There have been hearings. The doctor for Biden was actually in front of Congress, and all he did was take the fifth. There have been several other people around Biden that all they have done is take the Fifth Amendment. So we don't know anymore especially in the U.S. government, but probably most governments, how much of this is just posturing by the Congress just to show that they're, quote, doing something. But anybody with a brain realizes that this was a massive cover up. And everybody knows what happened. And there's also the fact that Joe Biden was, quote, diagnosed with diffusely metastatic prostate cancer after he lost the election, after he was out of office, is absurd. There's not a doctor in the world that's board certified that would ever not do a prostate specific antigen on a man, an older man, from the time they're 50, and if they're higher risk, a lower age. I mean, this is absurd. So this whole thing is covered up. And I would say that the subset of the issues that you mentioned, and I agree, they're horrible, against Netanyahu, are just part of a larger goal of the aid group, the government aid group, to undermine Western thought. I mean, don't forget, when Doge uncovered a ton of these things, including the anti-Israel stuff, that there was a ton of stuff that was uncovered that was basically teaching kids about Islam and how great it is, and teaching kids about how bad capitalism is, and so on and so forth, and helping transgender surgeries in New Guinea and things like that. I mean, it was a menu of despicable things that our tax dollars have been wrenched from us and spent in this kind of stuff instead of building roads and schools and providing the other kinds of things that government's supposed to provide.
But can I
Yeah,
just jump in with 2 points? First, on the sort of the Biden cancer. So, from what I at least understand, is with like older people, you don't like do these checkups because it's
When they're
no
the
longer safe.
president, you do. Believe me, you absolutely do, Daniel. I mean, I'm a doctor. I'm a
Yeah,
board certified
I'm not really.
internist. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
what excuses people have made.
yeah,
I
yeah.
get that.
Okay, fair
But
enough.
not when you're the president of the United States. There's medicine for thee and there's medicine for the royalty. Okay? We all know it. We don't like to say it. Anyway, go ahead. I apologize.
No worries.
Don't mess with Dr. Kaufman.
Yeah. I realized that maybe I shouldn't talk about cancer to somebody who actually has companies about it. But sort of like a separate point about, I think even Bonnie mentions it in the chat. He swore to protect the Constitution when the vice president realized Biden couldn't do, but she didn't speak up. Isn't that treason? I mean, there is actually in the Constitution, there is a way to remove the president if Kamala Harris wanted to. I think her and a majority of the cabinet could simply, I think, they go to President pro tempore in the Senate and basically say this guy is no longer capable of. I'm not sure if it was ever done so because again, it would require vice president to go against somebody who is already.
Daniel, they were hoping to get away with that. They were trying to get away with not admitting that he's incompetent. It's like it doesn't matter that they had the way or didn't have the way. That the least they could do is come clean and say, listen, Biden, we all know you cannot do this anymore. You must resign, and everybody knew that. Biden knew that. So it's not only the people surrounding him and his vice president and his family and his staff. They're all responsible, but I think people forget that Biden is also responsible. Like there is a state when you know you're not competent enough, you know you're doing this pretense, and you got to put a stop to that because you're leading the strongest superpower in the world, and like everybody's like, they were like, okay, yeah, whatever. So he couldn't do it and he did it anyway. But it's the people around.
Yeah, there's something beyond that. So, like even after the debate, it took a while before Biden actually stepped aside, and there was no attempt after the debate to invoke the 25th Amendment and say, look, we didn't realize this until we saw the debate, but maybe he shouldn't be president right now. And in a sense, it also, I think, might help Harris if she's the incumbent, although maybe they realize it wouldn't really help her if she has a few months to show what she would do. But yeah, anyway, this was this is why I say this was a historic election in so many ways. And I don't think the Republicans are clean in terms of they never cover up anything and they don't try. I think just the Democrats are so much better at it and they're so used to getting away with it that in this case, they thought even after the debate, we don't have to remove Biden. But back to the U.S. aid story, because this would have continued under Harris had the 25th Amendment been invoked and had Harris taken over. We talked about the various things that were uncovered that USAID was doing, and some of them are ridiculous, and we've ridiculed it as well. But even the ridiculous stuff is super sinister on every level, from the fact that you're taxing the American people to do this when much of it, if it is something that is ideological, people can choose where their money goes. If they want to send it to other countries and promote left-wing ideas, they can do it as individuals rather than the government forcing people to do that. But in this case, it is particularly sinister. I mean, look, George W. Bush was, one of the strongest arguments against him was that he's trying to, do regime change in various countries and how dare you and so on. For Biden, the one Middle Eastern country that needed regime change with the US involvement was the country that is America's only real ally in the Middle East, that elected the leader that maybe he doesn't like and but he has to work with. And yeah, that is something for Americans to worry about, maybe even more than Israelis, because you know, is this what you want to do? I mean, there are countries where, like Britain, for example, where I think America and the rest of the world would benefit if the current people in power were not in power. But I don't want to see, the Trump administration starting to fund Nigel Farage's prime ministerial campaign. That is not what, or Daniel's prime ministerial
Oh,
campaign.
us,
What?
us.
No, yeah, we will not accept funding from the Trump administration either, and I kind of don't think it's coming anytime soon. But yeah, Michael, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think in general, governments are horribly wasteful. What Doge uncovered, which was probably a little more than the tip of the iceberg, but certainly not most of the iceberg, is despicable and really upsetting. I think most of us who agree are a little bit cynical don't think that that money is going to be actually clawed back, but at least we're seeing a number of federal employees being fired and terminated, thank God, because these departments tend to metastasize and grow. And then what happens is you get this kind of so-called deep state. And the deep state isn't anything mystical. It's a bunch of people that have their own beliefs and their own guidelines, and the government's just too big for it to be properly managed. And that's what happened with USAID. I mean, it's not representing well, it certainly represented what Biden wanted, and certainly Harris, I do believe, because I do believe that the Democratic Party right now has gone so far off the left deep end and become absolutely crazy that, supporting transgender surgeries in third world countries is what they do, instead of removing illegal immigrants from America, especially illegal immigrants who have also committed violent crimes. And I worded that very carefully on purpose, because all illegal immigrants are illegal, and the ones that commit violent crimes should be at the top of the list to deporting. And we don't have that in the Democratic Party right now. And I'm not the least bit surprised. I think the amount of anti-Israel stuff that went on under Biden-Harris it's easy to see. How is it that all of these universities were allowed to continue to support, many of them actively, these kinds of anti-Israel, pro-terrorist, jumping around, disrupting schools, including schools that got a huge amount of federal funding? How were they, during the Biden administration, allowed to continue this really unimpeded? And we did have a nice show on TV when 3 university presidents were brought in front of Congress. No one expected the university presidents to do such an abysmal job. Surely they could have been a little more politically astute and at least given enough moderate, middle of the road non-answers, the way every politician has learned to give, so that they didn't put their foot in their mouth. But they didn't even do that. All 3 of those despicable people running 3 of the formerly elite universities in the US actually supported, under the guise of free speech, they supported terrorists. And they believe it's okay to intimidate Jewish students. We all know if the same thing happened to Blacks or Latinos or Asians or any other minority, this would never have been tolerated. But it was okay, and it was nationally televised. And it wasn't until the Trump administration came in and slapped all kinds of penalties on these universities that anything really changed. Sure, there were some change outs of the president, blah, blah, blah. The new president of Harvard is no better. He's just a little more politically astute. They're dying because Trump has put the pressure on them, but they're not any different philosophically minded. So I don't think this behavior vis-a-vis Israel is anything inconsistent with the entire anti-Western, anti-Israel, anti-meritocracy philosophy of the Democratic Party and really has gone to seed, to grow weeds under the Biden-Harris administration.
Thank you, Bull Moose, for the super chat. Bull Moose asks, can his doctor be indicted and at the bare minimum? Well, Michael, you're not a lawyer, but I assume this is maybe a part of the law that you might be certainly more familiar with than the rest of us.
Say it again. Sorry, I didn't understand the question though.
Can his doctor be indicted?
Look, I think the doctor can be indicted, but I think it's my understanding is, and my own training on doctor-patient confidentiality is we just hide behind that. Number one, you can hide behind the Fifth Amendment as well. And I know a lawyer will tell me it's not hiding, it's part of our Constitution, that's not hiding. Everybody with a brain agrees. We agree with the Fifth Amendment generally, but we also agree that if you're going to take the Fifth, it's because you have something to hide. Those two ideas can sit side by side with each other. This doctor knew, of course, that Biden was in deep trouble, and it didn't even have to be metastatic prostate cancer, which certainly can worsen dementia, but that's not the primary problem. It's basically pain, for those of you who don't know. And if it's bone pain, which it typically is, he might have well been on opiates. I mean, he well might have been on a fair amount of opiates that were required to keep the pain down. But I'm just saying, I don't think he can actually be convicted. He can probably be indicted, but I don't think he could be convicted because he'd have doctor-patient confidentiality as well as the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah, I mean, the Fifth Amendment is basically protects you against self-incrimination. So yeah, it does say something.
Saying I lied about somebody's medical status, would be self-incriminating, and so you should take the Fifth, because anybody, you don't have to be a physician to tell that Biden, and certainly after the debate, you knew Biden was not all there, not even a little bit there.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Yeah, this isn't the major news in Israel that it should be. And I wonder to what extent that is because the people who decide what is major news and what isn't, would very much like to see Netanyahu go. Now, I have to say, I also would like to see Netanyahu go, but for replaced by somebody with better ideas rather than worse ideas, as the left would like. Is this going to be a thing in maybe the next election, which might be coming very soon, or in any way is it going to make it into mainstream political discourse in Israel? Yeah.
Well, it will get into the discourse because I assume Netanyahu is going to use it in his campaign. So they'd have to relate to it. Now, you're absolutely right that the Israeli mainstream media, besides to challenge who are in the recent past starting to get stronger and stronger, are on the other side. But basically, there are two tribes. There is the pro-Bibi tribe and the anti-Bibi tribe in Israel. And most of the mainstream media is in the anti-Bibi tribes. Both tribes are very wrong because, in essence, it's tribal politics. So I have a lot of criticism on both tribes, but really the anti-Bibi tribe in this case is it's like major media outlets, organizations, there's some parts of the court system, some part of the unelected government bureau. They're all in the anti-Bibi tribe attempt to remove Bibi, and it's really pathetic to see them have so much resources from the United States, from other wealthy parties, and from taxpayers' money of Israel as well, and like it would have been so easy to do what they want to do and remove Netanyahu if they had just a little bit of integrity and was trying to promote something good and offer an alternative. But they're just doing a smear after smear after smear and a lie after a lie after a lie, and it just shows. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about the nature of the organizations in question. So what organizations are we talking about? And I'm saying this an Israeli who experienced that. So basically, those organizations have three major fields in which they act. So the first one is using Israel's Supreme Court against Israel. So they're spamming the court with plead against the government on everything, on immigration, on defense, on Israeli-Arab conflict, everything, trying to make Israel completely incapable to do anything. And some cases have even led to the Israeli failure defending itself in October 7th. Their second field of action is propaganda and campaigns, and these are all the smears and the billboards and news media and articles. And the third one, which is basically fueling the propaganda, is funding what they call demonstrations, and this is what is being referred to at the news. But these are actually mobs. These are mobs against the government. They disrupt public order, they block hallways, they set fires, and it's basically a poor yet well-funded attempt of importing the BLM protest style and completely disruption of civil order into Israel. And I'm seeing in the comments that never mind. Like I want to say, like the Israeli branches responsible for maintaining the civil order are not doing anything against those protests, and even the Israeli most supreme enforcer of the law, which is actively going against the government, says, well, there is no effective protest without disrupting civil order. So basically, the one who is responsible to enforce the law is basically saying, well, I'm not going to protect people's freedom and liberties and security because I want the protest against the government to be more effective. It's not about maintaining rights, it's about making the protest effective. And they're saying that. It's like there is no more explicit way to degrade yourself than what they're saying openly. They're not even trying to present some sort of a pretense of they're doing what they should be doing. And I want to say another thing regarding to the US intervention with Israel. So here's my case. A government should be rational, which means it should have an objective moral code, and this objective moral code should be followed by moral pride. So what is an objective moral code? Well, the country should promote liberty, individual rights. A proper government should protect its people and not turn against their freedoms. And what is moral pride? Well, once you have such a moral code, such a country should praise other countries that do the same and condemn states that does not. And this is what it has to be. It's not the case. What is happening in practice is that we have a worldwide code of immorality, and that follows with a lack of pride. So both feed into one another. The less pride we have, the less we would strive to make our moral code better, and vice versa. And that leads the world into a premise of moral relativism. So they're saying every country is okay, everything they're doing is okay. The worst tyrannies are okay as long as they're backed and they're basically the fulfillment of their people's will, which is complete nonsense. And then the United States of America, without a proper moral code and without pride, instead of saying, here's the moral code and we condemn countries who doesn't follow it and support countries who does, they go behind the scene with secret intervention, trying to create regime change within their allies. And or in the other case, doing like sanctions against individuals in countries that like without any due process, instead of like, I don't know, trying to use the criminal system or something. So it's all completely arbitrary and wrong. And here's another thing. On October 7th, 2023, I've read on the news that the Biden administration have set up like a war room, like a committee to deal with the quite likely then situation of Israel being completely destroyed and annihilated. So they were getting ready for this scenario. And now, according to the new information, in the same time, they were fighting mobs and organizations attempting to overrun the government and create complete chaos in Israel and complete like unorder within civil life. So it's just completely crazy.
Yeah, we know that the disorder that already existed in Israel over the judicial reform was inspiring to Hamas to do this when they did it. But yeah, Daniel, in terms of the people who who are running things behind the scenes and actually believe that this is the right thing to do. Do you have any book recommendations for them to maybe get their head out of wherever it currently is?
Well, I think I have one for our viewers. Let me remind that this episode of the reality show is sponsored by The Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy, a new book by Zoltan Sendes, inspired by The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So the book has 42 chapters. Of course, 42 for people who read it is the ultimate is the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And in the similar way, Zoltan goes and covers questions starting with why is there something rather than nothing, and then going into more science questions like what is light, is gravity an illusion, and many more interesting things. So if you are interested in science, or if you are an objectivist who is interested in those things, I definitely recommend The Objectivist Guide to the Galaxy. Link to that is in the chat, is also pinned, and is in the description as well. So you can check out the book on Amazon. It has also sold more than 10,000 copies. So I definitely, and it has only been released recently. So
More than 10,000 copies in the first 2 weeks. So we don't have an update since, but maybe we will get one and let you know. Yeah, Daniel, that sounds like a book that Candace Owens does not want people to read. Um, yeah. Any
well,
any
she
other thoughts?
left the cult of science. So
Yeah.
well, but yeah, moving back to the topic. So, I mean, first we just sort of talked about sort of if there are any obligations on the Biden's doctor on something. But the fact is, the current way, unless something changes, there is very little the presidents of the United States actually have to release. They don't have to release their tax records according to law. No reason or no law basically requiring them to release their health records. Maybe that is something that should be changed, especially with how much later the average age of the US president is getting these past few elections. So that can be something that can be considered. Now, when it comes to US aid, I think there's something important to say when it comes to general when people talk about sort of waste and fraud within the government, because the biggest problem with US aid, at least from what we've seen, is the fact that absolute majority of what it does is not waste and fraud in a way of it's like squandered or it's not going where it's supposed to be. The problem is that it is going where it's supposed to be, and that is not the place where the money should go. Now, the problem is when you go to sort of like an I assume an average American voter, and you ask them, "Hey, do you want high taxes, or do you want lower taxes, or do you want this organization that funds like anti-government organization somewhere else?" Everybody will say no. But then when you ask them specifics, I looked up some of the things USAID does. So there's a project called Feed the Future that is supporting small farmers to boost food security and in Ethiopia and Bangladesh. There's Wash in Kenya, which is building wells and improving hygiene. With many of those things, many people would say, hey, I don't necessarily mind this happening. But the fact is, sort of going to ER's earlier point, is this is not the purpose of government. And so, an essay that I recommend to everybody should read, and I would like force people almost to read it, is Frederick Bastiat's That Which Is Seen and That Which Is Unseen. Because what you see is the fact that, oh, but who's gonna provide, US aid sends people and cures AIDS in African states, builds wells in Kenya, supports farmers. You see those wells, you see those farmers. What you don't see is people like Michael getting taxed and not being able to improve cancer research, for example. You don't see that because it's not happening because of either higher taxes or money going somewhere else. So I think that is the scariest part about organizations like USAID. Is not the fact that money is being wasted, is the fact that Money is going somewhere where it's not supposed to. It should stay within the US taxpayers, and they should decide. Look, these, especially with the way US aid works, it's not like it is setting up its own thing. There are organizations that it's supporting. If people want to support those organizations, you can send the money yourself. You get a tax refund. Let's cancel US aid and everybody get a tax refund, and you can like point if you want to keep doing it, you can. But it shouldn't be a requirement. It shouldn't be within the congressional budget.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, this is wrong no matter which country does it, but it is fundamentally anti-American. And it's not anti-American to send your money to build a well in Kenya. It's anti-American to force others to do that. And as an individual, you can choose where your money goes if the government doesn't take it from you by force and send it to where the current politicians decide it should go. And Michael, I think, it's great that the current administration is dealing with this specific problem, but they are not dealing with it fundamentally. It's not like they are against, taxing people and then using the power of government to do what they feel is right at a given moment. I mean, Trump actually threatened to take Rosie O'Donnell's citizenship. And I'm not a fan of Rosie O'Donnell, but that is not a thing that government should be able to do. You criticize the president, you lose your citizenship. I mean, and yeah, Daniel now reminds me that they want to force Coke to put real sugar instead of high fructose corn syrup. And yeah, this is not, you don't want the government doing something like this. And what I'm worried about, no alternative to Trump in the 2028 election is going to say, let's stop doing this kind of stuff. They're just going to say, okay, we will send this money that we're going to tax out of Americans' pockets to better causes than the Republicans will send it to, and the Republicans won't say, no, we're just not going to tax. They are going to say we're going to spend it on better causes. How is this trend going to be reversed, Michael?
Sorry, can I
Well,
just throw a quick point on the real sugar? Sorry, but it's actually funny because so Trump mentioned he wants to, he talked to Coke about switching back to cane sugar. But the fact is, it is because of the government that Coke is using high fructose corn syrup, because it's because of the U.S. subsidies for agricultural farmers that basically soda companies are incentivized to use that instead of cane sugar, which is funny that there is a problem that government created and government wants to offer solution. Sorry, Michael, for jumping in, but
no. I think, Anders Igmarsson, who's on the show with us a fair amount of the time, wrote a nice book called, I think it was Vote Right or Wrong, Not Left or Right.
Think
Sorry,
right or
think
wrong, not
right or
left.
wrong, not left or right. And also, you should probably vote that way too. I've said many times on the show, and I mean, I agree with your frustration. I don't really think Donald Trump or most of the people around him, perhaps all the people around him, are actually philosophically bound people. I do think that their sense of right and wrong and what's good and what's evil is more on track than the current Democratic Party. I don't think that's hard. It's an extremely low ball, but I don't think this is philosophically based. And I don't think, if you're going to have a populist movement with a bunch of people that are not that well educated and don't think, then I think we're stuck. I don't know what to say. I mean, the population, everyone gets one vote. The Democrats would have illegal aliens getting the same vote that I get. I pay my large amount of taxes. They don't pay any. I take care of them. They get the same vote to pick people that I do. It's a disaster. But I don't see us getting to a bunch of people that are really smart. I'll just add to that. I think Daniel makes the point that, everybody wants to help have clean water in Ethiopia. And this is when you're a child, that's when you say, that's a good thing. I want to support that. When you're an adult, you say, well, what am I not doing? And a normal adult with a half a brain, especially one who pays taxes, would say, well, obviously we can't fund everything. So if I do that, I'm not going to do something else. And that's as simple as I would put it. The problem with the Democrats in general and the left is that they don't distinguish between what's good for America and what's good for the world. What's good for America is whatever feels good. And it feels good to say I supported a clean water situation in, in Ethiopia. And that's not how you make policy based on feelings. Now, I'm not saying the Republicans are doing it much differently, but I do think that their sense of right or wrong is far better than the right. And I've gone into the on purpose because we're stuck with the political system, at least in America, despite Elon Musk's goal for the American Party or whatever party he's going to name it. That we do have a left and right system in America. The left has gone completely berserk. The right is still holding on to some reasonable things. But it's not about right or wrong, and it's certainly not based in the philosophy that this country and other Western democracies were founded upon.
Yeah, Israelis tend to be more politically savvy than in most countries, and in part, well, not in part, it's mostly because it is life and death in Israel. You are in a constant lifeboat situation. They're more politically savvy, but that doesn't really reflect in, better better voting habits. Um, but you have to wonder if the worse the situation is, maybe the better the voting will be. And I'm wondering what you think, not just this most recent news that again isn't headline news in Israel, but generally everything since, because the next election in Israel, whenever it happens, is going to be the first election post October 7th, post this war, everything that happened, in Gaza, in Lebanon, with Iran. Um, are Israelis going to vote better in the next election? And is America going to be able to influence that in any way?
Well, I think, of course, events has a big role in that, but it's not an essential role. I think essentially it's about the ideas people hold. And yes, events affect the ideas, but it's about people in Israel making a choice what ideas to hold and how consistently are they to look at reality. And that's a question, for the Israeli people. I'm working on ideas. I'm working on intellectual works. That's my career. That's the organization I mean, whether it's Ayn Rand Center Israel, whether it's my appearance on this show, whether it's the Victory Now movement and the book. I'm doing whatever I can to work with Israelis on their ideas, but it takes more than that. So to your question, it's not like there's a deterministic way of like the events shaping people's ideas so they would vote better, but it's more like the work people has to do with themselves. And as you've seen with the many organizations funded by America, we have some pretty wealthy evil rivals trying to poison the minds of the Israelis. So it's a tough project.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, events are not going to really change the fundamental philosophy of people. You can see this in Israel today, because if you look at what people said right after October 7th, it was what you're saying in the Victory Now project. It was what we're saying on this channel, and it almost sounded that way even now. When you look at the legal case in international law, so not real law, against Israel, claiming that Israel is committing genocide, what you mostly hear from the people who say here's the proof is statements by Israeli politicians. Statements about they're all Nazis and stuff like that, which is factually kind of difficult to dispute, but again, the facts don't matter to these people often. But yeah, I do wonder if it kind of creates an opening, for people when they see bad events. I mean, we know on this channel, viewership until a year and a half ago, our viewers, the vast majority of our viewers, were objectivists or people interested in Rand and her ideas. Now that's a minority. The vast majority are people who came to us because of our coverage of the war and the cultural fallout of the war, and are hearing views that are clearer and more rational than what they hear elsewhere, even without embracing objectivism yet, although there's always hope. Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, somebody in the chat said, bring back the Freemasons. They had decent strategy, make decisions for people without them realizing it, which is really interesting thing to say. First, Freemasons didn't go anywhere. They still exist. I tried to join them actually at some point, but they didn't accept me. I think it's their loss. But this is not how societal change works. It's before the American Revolution or the year of the American Revolution, Thomas Paine released Common Sense, which advocated for the independence of Britain. Do you know who read Common Sense? Intellectuals and the people. It was one of the biggest bestsellers among the people, because this is what you need when it comes to any sort of change. Is you need both the sort of intelligentsia, or sort of the intellectuals arguing for it, but you also need the people. You cannot have this some forced thing. There is no sort of person we can introduce into Israeli or American society that suddenly everything will change. The fact is that you need this slow cultural shift that unfortunately has been going in the wrong direction for some time now.
All right. I was going to ask for parting thoughts, but Michael, I hope your parting thoughts are more optimistic than that. And where can people find you as well?
Well, yeah, I don't know if they're more optimistic. I think one of the other challenges in the Israeli system is this kind of what I think is an absurd need to form these groups of political parties. And you have people getting in bed with each other who really despise each other. And it just makes the whole thing much more difficult. So it's nice to see that the Orthodox have decided to run out from the government, although they claim they're going to continue to support it. It's remarkable to me that the Tel Avivians, who are by and large the anti-Netanyahu crowd, whose kids are all, by the vast majority of the kids that are in the reserves and in the army are non-Orthodox. And it's amazing that we keep sending our kids, including my kid, to the army to get into harm's way, while the Orthodox get to, quote, study the Torah. And they think it's God's given right to them to not only not have a job, but to be funded as parasites on society. And I'm using that word on purpose, and I would defy anyone to explain to me why they're not parasites, but to have our kids get into harm's way and they don't have to defend the country. And any idiot who says that reading the Torah and praying to God is defending the country should ask where the heck they were on October 7th, the Holocaust, and the innumerable number of attacks that Israel has undergone. This is clearly what they're doing is ineffective. It's using an antibiotic where the bug is resistant. So I don't mean to be too pessimistic about it, but it'll be very interesting to see what comes up. And I hope we have elections sooner rather than later. Hopefully something's going to change in Israel. Michael Kaufman, 2Fs on LinkedIn.
Yeah. We were gonna maybe talk about Israeli politics as a secondary topic. We never got to it. We will get to it, I'm sure, soon, because it does look like, well, there is turmoil, if not a full-on election coming. And yeah, when I spoke to Moshe Feiglin on the Daily Objective, he at some point said, the proof of God is the Jewish people surviving everything that has happened to them. And my answer to that was, I don't see how the Holocaust is a proof of God existing and being good. I mean, that's and he said, yes, I don't have an answer to that, which I think is the best answer from a religious leader that I've heard on that question. Yeah, parting thoughts, and where can people find you?
Well, I have a few things. I'll make it short. In regards to what Michael says, I just want to say I'm against forcing anyone to serve in the army. And the solution for the problem he has justly presented is stopping welfare. Let them get along whatever way they want. I don't give a damn how. And I should not fund them, and I should not be forced to go to the army. I went to the army and I'm proud of my service. Heading will go to the army as well, just by pride and sustaining themselves. My network is unstable, so I'll go even quicker. Based on Razi's comments of the nature of our viewers, I would urge everyone viewing us who haven't read The Fountainhead to go ahead and grab this book and read it. It's a life changer. And whoever read it, read it again. And where you can find me, I am an associate of the Ayn Rand Center Israel. Please go to aynrand.org I forgot the address. Well, to the Google Ayn Rand Center Israel. And I'm also a leading member in the Victory Now movement, which is we're working on a book to show the Israelis and the whole Western world a plan for Israel's victory. And as you know me as a person who is very into intellectual work and thinks that's the essential root cause of every change, this book also presents the moral cause and reasoning for such plan.
Daniel, parting thoughts. Daniel will put that link in the chat, hopefully, if he finds it. Parting thoughts, and where can people find you?
Well, I mostly said my last thoughts previously, but I would just echo. I think the main sort of corruption that is with the US aid is the fact that such an organization even exists. Again, the purpose of government is not to redistribute forces according to one person or two people or 51% of the population. The purpose of government is to protect individual rights and to ensure sort of peaceful coexistence within the population. With that, and USAID.
Where can people find you?
Oh, you can find me on this channel, but I also have my own channel, but I haven't posted that for a long time. But people will be able to find that in the description.
And that link to Ayn Rand Center Israel is aynrand.org.il. It is in the chat. It will be in the description. Deborah says, I read Atlas Shrugged when I was 12. I used to be a libertarian until I realized most of them were anti-Semitic, misogynistic morons. Yes, Ayn Rand despised libertarians in large part because of this. I don't think this was for specific reasons, but there are a lot of other bad things about libertarianism, certainly in the way that the Libertarian Party in the US sees it. The problem with libertarianism is it's not really a clear, coherent ideology. So there could be people, good people who describe themselves as libertarians, but Ayn Rand was not an advocate of that. I'm Razi Ginsburg on X. If you are in the continental US, in or near a major population center, chances are I'm coming to your area in the coming month or 6 weeks or so. So make sure you stay up to date. I'm doing events pretty much everywhere to promote the Irreplaceable Spark Conference, where Michael Kaufman, among others, will be speaking. That is October 25th, 26th in Orange County. Link in the chat and in the description. You will want to be there, so make sure you sign up as soon as you can. Thanks, guys, for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow with the Daily Objective.